Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. The show, as always, presented by FanDuel. Tonight, got a big show for you. Emily Leiker of the Star Tribune in a half an hour, and then Manny Hill to pick the final three of the games of the schedule. And we'll have a conversation as well. There is some really good football going on tonight. Manny and I we'll talk about expectations for these final three games and, whatever else comes up that is on your guys' minds. And let me get you a FanDuel question of the day based on the sound I'm going to play you in just a second, which is this: Justin Jefferson's over-under for this game against the New York Giants is 55.5 yards. Will they finally connect this week? Justin Jefferson and JJ McCarthy, and why as they play against the New York Giants. And what I want to hear from you guys is final three games of the season. What are your expectations? What do you need to see? What do you want to see most? Give me something really specific, not just, JJ McCarthy plays well. Like, what is it specifically from him? Give me one thing that you would like to see over these final three games, because I think at the very top of my list would be connect with Justin Jefferson against the New York Giants. Shouldn't be this difficult. Their defensive line is pretty nasty, but aside from that, the Giants have a very poor defense. It's time. Make it happen. Make it work. So I think that'd be a good place to start. And as it pertains to that, what did Justin Jefferson have to say about he and JJ McCarthy getting close to connecting? Well, I asked him that today at TCO Performance Center.
Did you guys feel like you were close after watching back the game to connecting on a lot of those throws?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like a step or two, and then of course me dropping the touchdown, all of that, just plays a part of that. So I got to do better. Everybody got to do better into doing what we need to do in every single play that we have. I always say, I got to take the most of my opportunities, and definitely didn't make the most of my opportunities these past couple weeks. So just kind of connecting with staying with JJ, and then after practice, having those reps, getting the ball in and out of his hands, and making sure that we're connected with the spot of the throws, where the ball need to be at, and the different looks that we kind of have throughout the game, that the throws might be a little bit different in practice than they are in the game. So just kind of talking with him through that, and making sure we're on the same page.
Justin Jefferson there talking about practicing extra after, trying to get it right for what it looks like in the real game versus just in practice, which players have continued to say that they are connecting in practice. It's just got to happen in the game, and a lot of other stuff. TJ Hawkinson said today that the world over the last 2 weeks has seen a lot of other stuff that JJ McCarthy has been able to do in practice that I feel like we talked about week after week. Like, hey, they say it's working, and yet we're not seeing it come to fruition. And we kind of have over these last 2 weeks as McCarthy has gotten a little more in sync with the offense, a little more confident in the offense. TJ Hawkinson talked about the throw down the seam that he made against the Dallas Cowboys, and that's a tough throw and a tough catch, but that's the type of play that they believe they're capable of making. And when we go back through the throws to Justin Jefferson in the Dallas game, there's one down the sideline where Jefferson is clearly interfered with. There's one in the end zone that doesn't count. There's one in the end zone that's off his fingers. There's a number of plays, the crossing route that's off the tips of his fingers. It does feel like it is very close, and the opportunities have been there, yet they have not been able to figure out a way to just click the way that we normally would expect. And we'll take a look in a moment of some of the situation with the corners for the New York Giants, but it's not particularly compelling what they've done in their secondary this year. But the one thing that has come up pretty often is just how hard JJ McCarthy throws the football. And TJ Hawkinson did mention today that when you throw the ball that hard, and he's not saying it as a criticism, he's just saying like a reality for wide receivers, that you do need to get your head back a little faster, and you do need to, make sure that you can see the football as it's coming in, and you got to be ready for that thing cooking. So here's what Jefferson had to say about catching the football when it's coming at high velocity from JJ McCarthy.
Have you played with a quarterback that throws it as hard as JJ does?
JJ is definitely one of the top gunners that I played with. But I mean, my brother always had a strong arm, and he was able to really sling the ball to me at a very young age. So I was pretty used to just catching those velocity of a football. But it just goes back to, just like he kind of said, just having that rhythm and just only touching the ball 2-3 times and then getting that type of heater. It's a little tough sometimes, but it's never an excuse for me, and that's always a ball that I need to catch.
And I think we would all agree that the one in the end zone is one that he normally catches. And I think if he brings that in, it's much less of a conversation than it would have been otherwise still coming out of that game. So this seems like it's the week. And one of the things that I was a little surprised by is when looking at the Giants defense, is some of the guys that they have in their secondary were actually free agents that we talked about a lot in the offseason of, hey, maybe the Vikings should look at this guy or that guy, and ranking our free agents as we'll, do again this year. But somebody that we talked about quite a bit was Paulson Adebo, who had played for the New Orleans Saints, kind of a playmaking cornerback. And this year he has had by far his worst PFF grade of his career, which kind of shows you that, defense, scheme, pass rush, who you're playing with, who you're playing against, it all matters quite a bit. But last week he had a 39.4 PFF grade, got absolutely smoked by Washington, and he's only got a 49.7 all season long, is allowing 67% completion percentage into his throws. So he's had a very tough year, and Justin Jefferson, I think, has an opportunity there. Their other corner is Cordell Flott, who I was not familiar with your game very much. He has played quite a bit for the Giants last couple years, but the Giants have been bad the last couple years. He's had a couple of moments so far this season, a 3rd-round pick in 2022. He's been one of their higher graded defensive players by PFF, but has 8 pass breakups. That might be somebody who ends up matching up with Jefferson. But I don't think that either one of these corners offers all that much resistance against a wide receiver of his caliber. And then the other player that surprised me that's not playing that well is Javon Holland, who has been really, really good and got a big paycheck from the Dolphins. Or in his time, got a big paycheck from the Giants after his time with the Dolphins. He was somebody that just the other day, Brian Flores referenced as a guy who he gave control to of the defense. And Holland this year, 54.5 PFF grade, has allowed, not only 16 for 28 passing into his coverage, but a lot of big plays, almost 16 yards per reception, only a handful of pass breakups, just hasn't had a big year. The whole point is that if they could get the ball off, that this is the time. Like, there's not going to be another time. Jefferson is tended to have some really good days against the Detroit Lions, but there's not going to be another time where it should be this right there for you for Jefferson and JJ McCarthy. So this is a little bit of a test case of, can you guys connect when you're playing one of the poorer defenses in the NFL with a very underwhelming secondary and a team that has maybe possibly given up. So that's where we're at with Justin Jefferson. It feels like they're close. It seems like the opportunity is right there for him. And I think if you're going with that FanDuel question of the day, his over-under 55.5, hammering the over on this one, because it almost feels like we've reached the end of a road of, all right, they're kind of getting it together. They're getting going and they're working with each other and they just need a little chemistry and just a couple more weeks. It's over. Okay, well, now you've played together enough times where it doesn't matter that you didn't have training camp many, many months ago. You've practiced together every day. You've strung together games where he's played, what would it be? Going back to the Lions game, is this Let's see, 2 and carry the 1. So 6 out of the last 7. So now you're going to get 7 out of the last 8. Like, you've been on the field a lot together. Click, do it, make it happen. I think this should be the week for those two to get on the same page. As far as the injury report goes, Christian Darrisaw not practicing today. Brian O'Neill and Ryan Kelly were limited. And with veterans like that at this time in the year, that means there's a pretty good chance that both of those guys play. That would be a big benefit for JJ McCarthy, because even though Dexter Lawrence has a half a sack this year, which blows my mind. Like, Dexter Lawrence's stats this year just seem fake. Like, how could he not have the type of production that he had last year when he had 9 sacks, or the year before when he had 65 quarterback pressures? His numbers this year are nowhere near that. But, if you're playing backups across the line, I mean, he's for a quarterback that still does hold on to the football. He was very good against Washington at getting rid of it, but did hold on to it a little longer for longer developing routes against Dallas, and did a good job on those plays. But still, I mean, Dexter Lawrence, if he's at 100%, or he's trying to boost his statistics against the backup and not Ryan Kelly, he could have some issues there, even if he's having a down season. And then the edge rushers, if Darrisaw's not in, Burns has 13 sacks this year, so he can create pressure. Abdul Carter is coming off of one of his best games of his career. And coincidentally, Abdul Carter, and I know we've had this discussion with, sacks and, Dallas Turner, or even Jonathan Grenard with pressures versus sacks. Abdul Carter actually leads their team in pressures, but only has a couple sacks. But he's starting to get it, I think, now that he shows up to meetings at the right time and doesn't get suspended for quarters like he has been before. But this is a team with a lot of talent, and if they are having to play Justin School, if they are having to play Blake Brandel at center, or however it might work out, there could be some weaknesses here on the offensive line that last week they were just not matching up with any sort of top players, and this week they are at those edge positions. They were matching up on the interior last week and did a good job with it. Jackson and, of course, Kelly was huge last week, and Will Fries, who overall has done a really good job. And we'll get into this in these last 2 weeks, 3 weeks of just kind of spotlighting on certain players and like, hey, was this worth it? Or how did that guy do? But, Will Fries was very good against the Giants and has a chance to end the year strong after I thought early on kind of battled through that injury and coming back. But he's going to be big in this matchup as well, because if they protect it all, then the field should be wide open. And they should definitely be able to run the football. The Giants have been terrible against the run. So your thoughts on, is it time, JJ, still connecting or starting to connect with Justin Jefferson for the first time, or are you skeptical on that? And what other questions, comments, and thoughts do you have? Coming up at 7 o'clock is Emily Leiker, and then Manny is going to be on at 7:30. But what else is on your mind into these final 3 games with the Vikings? Or I should even also throw out there, as we really begin the offseason process, because every year I write an article that is the future of the Vikings. I've done this going back since 2016. I've written every single year, the future of the Vikings. As soon as the season ends, I'll look at every single position, the cap hits, the options, the draft, the free agency for every single position on the Vikings. And I feel like I can get going a little bit earlier this year. So I'm starting to shift my mindset into, all right, it's time to look at that future again a little bit earlier than we thought we were going to. So what's on your mind for these last 3 games, along with finding a way for JJ McCarthy and Justin Jefferson to connect? Let's start off with Williams. Says Jefferson will be over 55.5 yards on Sunday. What is your percentage that McCarthy will be the starting quarterback in 2026, or will the Vikings go big game hunting after Joe Burrow? Well, here's the absolute truth would be, okay, I shouldn't call it the absolute truth. My assumption is that they will check on Joe Burrow. because every team that needs a quarterback, even if you got somebody you like, the New York Giants will check on Joe Burrow, even if they like Jackson Dart. There will be every team that doesn't have a quarterback totally locked in. And there might be some teams that have a quarterback locked in that are like, would you take a Stafford for Goff type of deal? There's going to be a lot of phone calls to Cincinnati, even if Burrow has a big contract, even if Burrow has an injury history. He's just that good. And everybody knows you get him on a good team in a good franchise, and you've got yourself a serious chance to win. And even if you have to rebuild parts of your roster, he's won more games than he's lost, even with the Bengals being inept and terrible over the last few seasons when he's been in there. So they will go after Joe Burrow if there's any possibility that they could actually bring him in. As of this moment, that does not seem very likely. As sad and frustrated as Joe Burrow is, the interpretation that I think I would have, and I saw Albert Breer was talking about this as well, that I think the right interpretation is I am the captain now, Joe Burrow. Basically, I am now running this team, and we're going to do what I want us to do, or I'm going to be somewhere else. Because he does have a contract that eventually runs out, and he could leverage retirement like Carson Palmer, or he could leverage just sitting out until his contract runs out. So more or less, you get behind Mr. Burrow, or you are going to be watching him play for another team. And he's reached the point in his contract where he's not quite there yet, where he could just say, all right, I'm letting this thing run out. I'm going to sit out whatever season, then come back. But he's close. He's not that far away. And the way that most of these contracts are set up, especially with all the void years that are kicked into the future, Joe Burrow can say, I'm not redoing that contract. They're usually set up to have a moment where you redo the deal. And this goes for Justin Jefferson as well, by the way. This is when you can redo the deal. And when you reach that point, that's when the player actually gets some of the leverage back. So I that would be my guess of how this goes, where Burrow kind of takes the reins of the franchise and they essentially have to do what he wants them to do, check certain boxes that he wants them to check, or else. That's how it feels. But we may have already reached critical mass with that. We may have already reached a point where he wants to go somewhere else and he's going to demand that. I just think it's not quite on the horizon yet, but it feels like it's getting closer, and we'll see how this season ends. But that wasn't your question. Percentage chance that McCarthy ends the season or starts 2026 with the Vikings, I think I would go 70%, because we don't know the results of the last 3 games. And as much as there seems to be a turning of the corner, which we talked about a lot throughout the year, like, is there going to be? And the last couple weeks, it looks like that with better performance. So if it keeps going in that direction, then there's not going to be a better option outside of Joe Burrow. And it becomes a higher and higher percentage each week. Like right now, I'd put it at 70, because I think that there has been enough progress to say, all right, this is your quarterback. Keep working with him. Keep going that direction. And if he does a lot of these things, okay, your sins are not forgiven for 2025, but they will be a lot more if everybody's on the same page for next year. You can continue on the direction you thought you were going to be on in 2025. That's if he plays well over these last 3 games. But it's also possible that it's a meltdown, and then what do you do, right? If you end up with an 11-game sample where he finishes the season 40th out of 44 quarterbacks by PFF, quarterback rating, EPA, whatever metric you want to use, you can't go into next year sure. Then you would have to have it totally up in the air with a quarterback competition with somebody else, which there would be some percentage chance that he could lose. So there's several different avenues this could go. There's all the way really excellent. There's all the way really struggling. And then there's somewhere in the middle, which is probably the toughest place to be. But if it's somewhere in the middle, you're still very likely going with JJ McCarthy in 2026. I saw that it was floated out there a little bit by ESPN's Jeremy Fowler to do the Kyler Murray thing. That's something that maybe Manny and I will get into a little bit later. If they do something like that, then to me, that means they're just out. Like if he plays okay in the last 3 games and then they start going after Kyler Murray, all right, then they were really worried about what they saw for this season, how it went behind the scenes, and they feel like this is not happening. That's if they go after someone like Kyler Murray. If Marcus Mariota comes in here, well, I mean, that's really not a quarterback competition. And who's in between? Like is a Geno Smith, are they out, or is that somebody to compete with him? I don't think they can trade for Tua. I wouldn't want them to trade for Tua. And that's the other part. The options are just not good. And that would increase the percentages that this option is still the best, even if you don't love some of the stuff that you saw. And this has happened through history where a quarterback comes in and it doesn't go very smoothly at the start. And then there is a growth, there is a development. I mean, we are talking about someone who's still very young, and it takes another step forward where even if the coaches or even if the fans or even whoever didn't believe in that person, then they start to show that you should. And we don't have enough of a sample size to say for sure where he lands on that spectrum. Hunter says at least part of the reason I've got some skepticism about McCarthy, the offense is run through Jefferson and he's not hitting him, then the offense probably isn't running right. That I completely agree with, right? I mean, that's exactly right, that the offense is designed and has been so effective in running through Justin Jefferson that if it's not clicking, if he's not getting 90 to 120 yards on a regular basis, then something is not being operated correctly. These plays, I mean, some of them, yeah, you're going and identifying Jordan Addison's got a shot here, Hawkinson's got a shot here. That's supposed to happen. The lack of plays is a real thing. That they have not had that many plays this year because they haven't sustained drives, but also that's because they haven't connected with Justin Jefferson anywhere near as much as they should. So when all the routes are often designed to, hey, grab this safety and move him away from Justin Jefferson, create this space, get this timing route, and you can't execute that yet, then to me, you're not running any sort of version of the Minnesota Vikings offense. You're okay in the last 2 games and you survived in the last 2 games, but you can't go week to week like this. So that's a nice litmus test for the last 3 games, because it's very hard to believe, oh, it's all fixed, it's all just perfectly fine, unless it's working with Justin Jefferson. I think that's a really good point. Mr. Mayer says, I don't expect it, but need to see him get Jefferson to 1K. If we don't get him at least one 100-yard game, I'll be frustrated. Yeah, and Justin will too. He did say last week that 1,000 yards is important to him, and I mean, of course it is. But if you can't get him there, I mean, where is he at right now? That just seems impossible that you can't get him to 1,000 yards this season, considering his career, considering like how many targets you can pump his way. I mean, maybe that week, that final week of the season is going to be all just throwing it up to Jefferson. 832. So that's 168 yards over the last 3 games. I mean, I'm not great on the fly, but that's about 60 something yards a game, right? To get him there. I mean, come on. Like, that's not that hard. You can get the best receiver in the world, 60 yards per game. Let's see. Aiden says, I love Justin Jefferson, got his jersey, but I need him to catch the ball. Come on, you're a pro receiver. Yeah, I mean, it is harder than you think, but you're right. That some of the catches have been there and he has not been able to make them. But, when we look at Jefferson's career and in terms of a drop rate, I'm curious how much different it is than usual for his career. So he's got 5 drops so far this season. He had 6 last year. He had 9 in 2021. He had 7 in 2022. His drop rate is 7% this year. It was 5.3 last year. It's been as low as, well, that was 2023. So that was a shortened year. it's not that different. His career drop rate is 5.4, and this year it's 7.0. I mean, that's 1.5% difference. It's not been like he suddenly forgot how to catch a football. I think he's always had some drops when you throw it to him as much as they have. And that is a little bit higher, but it's not like it's a 20% drop rate and his career is 5. This is only slightly higher. It's just that they've struggled so much to connect that every single drop feels devastating. And it feels like there's so few opportunities to get him the football or accurate throws his way this year that every drop just feels like the end of the world. So it's not to excuse some of the drops. It's just to say that it's not that different. You just didn't think about it when he was catching 8 for 11 for 97 yards or something on a regular basis. You think about it a lot more when there's been so few chances. John says, would like them to continue to play 13 personnel. Jets needs to have a little patience. Next year will be better. Oh, I mean, he's had the patience of an angel, I think, this year when you consider all that he's gone through. I mean, I know what you're not criticizing him or saying that he hasn't been patient, but I mean, he's been as patient as you could possibly be. I think there's other wide receivers who probably would have had different reactions to this. I do agree with you, though, on the 13 personnel, 12 personnel, 21. I mean, putting in bigger bodies is something that I think they've done a great job with. And I had in my article today about his statistics, McCarthy's, when they use bigger personnel, have been at least solid. Now, some of that is 3rd and 10, you're not using 3 tight ends. So that always kind of boosts the numbers versus 11 personnel. But I think it's been very useful for the pass protection, for simplifying, like, hey, there's only 2 guys out on this route. So, or on this concept, there's only 2 guys going out on routes and then a check down. Like, it's not that hard to find. And that's how a lot of that big personnel stuff works, is you get the extra protection, you get extra time, you run play action, you draw the defense in on run looks, and then you send 2 guys out. And if it's not there, you scramble or check it down or toss it away. And that's a good way to do it. But I can't question the man's patience. Forrest Jones says, Jefferson is going to go for 130 on Sunday. Call me crazy, but I wouldn't trade JJ McCarthy for anyone. He's a rare human and elite talent. He's going to win multiple Super Bowls. Okay, well, that's wouldn't trade him for anyone that's way over the top, obviously. Winning multiple Super Bowls is way over the top to say about someone on a franchise that hasn't even reached the Super Bowl since the 70s. I mean, it's nice to have optimism about what you've seen from McCarthy, but I think saying you wouldn't trade him for Joe Burrow I think you would. I think that if you were the GM and that was actually on the table, I think you actually probably would, based on what you've seen and what Joe Burrow was able to do. It's not a slight of McCarthy to say that he isn't making progress or improving, or that this can't really, really work. But there's a list of quarterbacks that you would just say yes to almost regardless of the price. Jefferson has to stay because it doesn't make sense otherwise, but I think you would do that. Now, 130, yeah, I mean, I think that's very possible. Looking at the Giants' defense, I think that's very possible. Lenny answering the question of what you want to see in the last 3 games. Want to see McCarthy limit turnovers and sacks. He's done a great job of that the last 2 weeks. That's been the biggest thing he's been praised for from O'Connell, and I would as well, because I had this math. Now I can't remember it. But it was like 1 every 6 dropbacks. He was either getting sacked or throwing a pick at one point. And I was like, okay, this does not work. So he badly needed these last 2 weeks to be a better decision maker with the ball. And he's been excellent. Mr. Mayer says, honestly, don't care if it's better for winning to go through the tight end heavy offense. I'd rather we prioritize pushing the ball to JJ. His career is on a historic path, and this is a lost season. Yeah, I mean, whatever it takes. A lot of times if you're running the bigger personnel, that's opportunities still off play action for the number 1 wide receiver. There's a lot of teams that have done it that way For whatever reason, Andre Johnson's Texans popped into my mind for that, where they used to run a lot of big personnel with fullbacks and tight ends and stuff, and they would have him as their main priority target. And then the Vikings have done stuff like that with Jefferson, and just it has not been able to click. Aiden says, I want to see Dallas Turner have a good game. I'd like to see him have 3. I would like to, and I know sacks are a goofy stat, but sacks matter. I would like to see Dallas Turner finish the season with 7.5 sacks. That would be big progress from last year. You'd like to see him consistently pressure the quarterback, but even if he has some reps that don't really go anywhere, but some really explosive, exciting reps where he gets a sack, like he did against Seattle or like he did against Green Bay, and it's consistent over these last 3 games. That's what you want to see from him. Like make some difference-making plays in that Jonathan Grenard position and walk out of this year going, you know what? Like he really took a big step forward. And these last 3 games will shape the way we view that discussion. Jay says, what do you think about trading for Burrow or Murray? Well, I mean, Burrow to me is just obvious. Like, yeah. I mean, but Kyler Murray is much more complicated because for me, Kyler Murray when did he peak? 2021 is when he had his best season. I think the NFL has changed quite a bit since 2021, and he really hasn't had a season that excites you since then. Now, he's won some games, and last year he's a 500-ish type of quarterback, and he had some exciting moments. 82 PFF grade last year, 93.5 quarterback rating. He still runs extremely well despite the ACL, but is this somebody who can consistently be great week to week in this offense? Or is it a guy who can, what I've always thought of Murray is be very exciting one week and then shockingly bad the next week. And that's okay. If you're a really poor team and you need a quarterback to jumpstart you, all right. But is he the one that is going to make you a serious contender in the NFC North? I'm a little more skeptical of that. I mean, I know that, they did what they did with Sam Darnold and he elevated his game at a point where people thought that he was just a backup quarterback. But with his size, does Kyler Murray really fit what KOC wants to do? The only scenario where I would say yes is if they're just completely toast with McCarthy. Like, let's just say this is just a scenario. So this isn't like, anything factual, but let's just say that behind the scenes, they're just really concerned and they think like, he's not coachable. And again, this is a scenario. He's not coachable. We don't like what we see. Like the teammates don't like him as much as it's supposed to be. Like, I don't know. Right. And we don't think he can make any progress. Okay. At that point, you need an answer, and you need an answer for 2026 fast. Then roll the dice on Kyler Murray. He's probably the best option you're going to find. If it's not what I described, if teammates are behind him, if the coaches feel like they've got something they can really work with, if they feel like progress is seriously being made at the end of this season and they can pick up where it left off, work out in the offseason as Justin Jefferson talked about, all those sorts of things, well then you're not considering Kyler Murray. Okay, I got to make a radio appearance on WCCO radio, which is why my phone is ringing, but I had a chance to talk with Emily Leiker of the Star Tribune out at TCO Performance Center today, so here is our conversation about these last 3 games. All right, we welcome back into the show Emily Leiker of the Minnesota Star Tribune in her first full season here in the National Football League, 1.5, I guess, seasons last year. You joined at a very unique time in Vikings history, but I got 5 questions for you, and I threw one of them out to react to. Now the new 5th question will be about who's playing Christmas Day at US Bank Stadium, because that's going to be a thing that we get to see. But I think the first question for the last 3 games is really what we're looking at here is how many games do you think that we need, the Vikings need, the world needs of seeing a quarterback before we can decide what that quarterback is, and why is it not 11?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be like we're going to have to go bleed into the beginning of next season, I think. But we can't see him drop off again in the next 3 games. Like he needs to at least maintain the level he's been playing at the past 2 weeks against the Commanders and then the Cowboys, if not build on that. I think the biggest thing that you would probably want to see in the next 3 weeks specifically is him hit Justin Jefferson a few times. Obviously, they're trying to get him to 1,000 yards, and right now that feels completely unmanageable for him and McCarthy based on where their relationship's at least in terms of on-field connection. But yeah, an exact number, I think by the end of September next year, you will want to feel like he is stable, that he can do most of the concepts you're throwing at him, that there is a level of consistency there for him. It's not going to be in these final 3 games that all comes to fruition and you feel, I think, fully confident in it. But I think by that first month of next season, you should be able to say, yes, we're comfortable. We're not going to have to be thinking about whether we should switch QBs in December, all of that.
I think when it's always different for almost everybody because there's different circumstances. So if it was the New York Jets and Sam Darnold, and in his year 2, they hired Adam Gase and still didn't get him any good wide receivers and had a bad franchise, bad owner, bad offensive line, bad running game, whatever, it was probably not fair to him to get judged as quickly as he did. I think when you have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, now we could throw Jalen Naylor in. We've seen TJ Hawkinson play a lot better when the ball comes anywhere near him. Josh Oliver makes a catch that JJ McCarthy tried to throw through his body like a javelin. But they've got the weapons. The offensive line has played really well in these last couple of games. I think earlier in the season, there were some games where you'd say, I'm not sure, against Atlanta, if any quarterback has a great night that night with the blitzes they were sending, the success they were having there. But the last couple of games, I think really the key is he's had enough time to work with, and you start to see a little bit more of what you really have there. But the answer, I think, is exactly right for you, that through the end of next season, midway through, is very fair. The end of the first month, I think, is very fair. But I also think there's a world where he could not play well in these last 3 games, and that would be much more educational than if he does. Does that make sense? Like these 3 teams, you have 2 bad defenses, another defense that won't have Parsons and might have their playoff position solidified already. And if that's the case, I don't think we could take a lot from it unless he plays bad. And then you're like, well, it couldn't have been much easier for you to play these last 3 games, 2 of them being at home. So you have to make that happen to at least give hope to next year. So I think it's kind of like a not much of a win situation for him to prove himself, because it's basically don't lose.
Yeah, no, I think that's certainly right, because if he goes into New York and looks ridiculous against New York's defense, then that is concerning, because one, he looked good against the Commanders and the Cowboys defenses, which I think are probably on similar levels of success this season and are not as good as many of the other defenses that they've faced this season and that he's had to face. So yes, I think that's a good point. And I think also, like, my point about through 1 month of the season next year is not like, is this guy like going to be the guy for 10 years and he's going to be a Hall of Famer or something. It's just, can this guy carry you through a few seasons and like help you find success with this roster that you've built to have success now?
Right. There's a lot of quarterbacks we can look at who've had their down moments or their doubt moments of, Bo Nix or Trevor Lawrence, who's changed coaches a couple of times, even Jordan Love. There have been times in his career where people have asked, like, how good is this guy really? McCarthy is trying to get to a different spot, though, where he just has to make his case for, I am your sole quarterback for next year with a reasonable backup, not, oh my gosh, the franchise is scrambling and hoping to find the next Daniel Jones, which, as we know, has a ceiling on it. And we've seen that many times through history. All right. The second question I have for you, it also pertains to JJ McCarthy. I want to know from your viewpoint what you think the best and most translatable things to the future that he does and your number one concern with him going forward.
That's a good one. I mean, right now, and I kind of just mentioned this, but like I think the most pressing concern is like this inability to get the ball to Justin Jefferson. And I know that there are a lot of factors playing into that aren't directly JJ, but we've seen other like Sam Darnold got the ball to Justin Jefferson last year when they were first facing these defenses that Justin talks about, where he's like, I've never seen these coverages before, and they're double, triple teaming me, whatever. That was so new to the Vikings and having a game plan against that, and yet still Sam Darnold got Justin Jefferson the ball. And so right now, just like that complete lack, and obviously there was some moments taken away. There was the one by penalty the other night and things like that. But that, I would think, like if we don't see that in the next couple weeks, they better be putting a whole lot of work in the offseason. Like you have to make sure that Justin Jefferson's at OTAs again, and that maybe him and JJ are spending like a whole month of the offseason just throwing 100 passes every day, whatever it needs to be, to get that going, because you want him to be much more involved next year than he has been this year, obviously. As far as things JJ does well, this is probably not entirely what you're looking for, but I think the way he has seemingly maintained this locker room and some of this team's most important leaders, and obviously guys like Jefferson, like playmakers, the way JJ has maintained like their trust and their support. And obviously like there's a level of, okay, are they saying this just because they're talking to the media, they're in front of cameras? But I do feel like, one, this is a pretty honest and transparent locker room, and two, you can tell in just the ways they say it, where like Jefferson's been candid that there are struggles of playing with a young quarterback, but he still says, I believe in JJ to get through this. And so I think that speaks to his like leadership, what the team sees in him in practice and stuff, and kind of the glimmers of hope that we keep hearing about there, where he looks good in those situations. It just isn't quite fully translating yet.
Well, I also think that the locker room is understanding of the circumstances that he was put in. Follow up a 14-win season. You've never played in the NFL before. And then we can't underrate, as we're trying to evaluate the situation, just how much missing 5 weeks in the middle of your season, like building up some momentum. You know, this is the first stretch minus the Seattle game where he was able to actually build up a week after week after week. Think about it. He plays 2 games and then there's a 5-game stop. He plays, even just 4 more games, and then there's another stop. But he didn't have that early in the season. And I've thought many times about, well, what if he did get to just play Atlanta?
Yep.
And then I don't think the Pittsburgh defense is all that special. Like, go play Pittsburgh. Cleveland's is, but, play that and like get going in those games. Philadelphia's got a good defense, but like build up those reps with Justin Jefferson, build up those reps of just playing quarterback, dealing with the ups and downs, having that big chunk of the season taken away from him. And then to go along with last year, it's like, man, the guy's been on the team for 600 days and now is playing his 9th ever game. Like that's really hard to get into a flow of playing quarterback, which is why I think it makes it so hard for us to judge. For me, I totally agree with the concern. For me, the concern is just still the throwing.
Yeah.
Is that if you, on a week-to-week basis, cannot be super consistent with your throwing, then some weeks Naylor's going to catch that. Some weeks that's going to get picked off. Some weeks Hawkinson's going to catch that one floating ball. Some weeks the safety's going to break on it and pick it off. And it just has to get to more consistent, which I think can only happen through playing.
Yeah, and to your point about him like missing that time too, I wonder how much earlier in the season we may have seen some of these conceptual changes that the Vikings have had with the offense, or even if they had been necessary at all, right? Like maybe they weren't necessary if he had had those reps early on, and like that's like the big caveat, and I get it sucks to have to do like a what if scenario, but that's just the truth, is like, what if he had played those 5 games early on? How much different would we be looking at his season? How much different would his season look?
Number 3 question is, have you started to use like, overthecap.com or whatever to look at free agent options, trade options at quarterback, or with the way he's played over the last couple weeks, have you not bookmarked that website?
I have not been looking at Over the Cap quite yet. We did have a discussion on our Star Tribune podcast, Access Vikings, the other day, just very loosely about the Joe Burrow situation, and if there could be any move there, anything happening. Obviously, that was one where we did look at over the cap and said, well, that would be a lot of money for the Vikings to take on, and there would have to be a lot of restructuring there. Obviously, I don't think the Bengals would want to take on much of that responsibility if they were losing a player like Joe Burrow. But no, I have not dug too much into numbers yet. I usually, by nature of all the writing I have to do, stick very day to day at this point.
Well, the thing that I've been asking everybody is about my take that the Vikings should just, no matter what happens in these last 3 games, roll with JJ McCarthy, even if it's a bad game in New York that shocks us, a good game against the Packers that everyone's excited about, that up and down, that, hey, now we officially have a roller coaster, by the way. It was mostly just down, but now it went up.
Yeah.
So now we've got a roller coaster, but that's only, I guess, if it goes down. I don't know. It's hard to figure out that metaphor. But if there is those moments, if there is a down in New York and an up against Detroit or whatever, as long as it isn't a catastrophe, as long as it isn't 2 touchdowns, 8 picks, and everybody is just throwing their hands up in the air, which I don't expect to happen against these last couple opponents, especially since he already beat Detroit, and New York is every bit as bad as Washington and Dallas. A little bit better in the pass rush, I think, which could impact him, but that they should go in regardless because they don't have enough information still, and the teams that have stuck with these quarterbacks through thick and thin have often been rewarded for doing so. And I feel like if they bail out now, they put a ceiling on themselves where, okay, you traded for Mac Jones, congratulations on your 8 wins. It's just really hard to see a team going out and finding a quarterback in this year's free agency trade environment, unless it's Joe Burrow, that would make a case for you being a legitimate contender next year.
Well, and they undo any goodwill they've earned in the quarterback ecosystem and break their kind of mantra of organizations fail quarterbacks before quarterbacks fail organizations. Like, there's just no avenue in my mind where they would somehow get through the next 3 games, even if they were shut out in all 3 of them, like, and JJ looked horrible, where they would be like, nope, yep, that's it. We're done with this. We can't do it. Like, there's just no avenue, I think, where they do that, to all of the points you mentioned and that mantra that they have and this feeling that they have about QBs. And I think you see it, like, why they say that in guys like Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, these guys who were given up on by their organizations early in their careers and are now 26, 27, 28, however old they all are, and are these guys that were like, well, if you had Daniel Jones, you'd be winning right now. And it's like, okay, the Giants were maybe saying that. He's not maybe the best example, but like the Jets weren't saying that about Sam Darnold. And now we're seeing, is Sam Darnold going to lead the Seahawks to the Super Bowl? Like, you just have to balance those things. And I get no one wants to be patient anymore in football or in life. And we've all been taught to act like that now. But that's what this requires, this sport requires, and I think quarterbacking specifically requires.
Yeah, and I do think that it is a fast-moving world of organizations because there's so much pressure out there, and you'd love to, I know Wes Phillips made a comparison to Tom Landry earlier this year, but Tom Landry was a coach in the 60s, and there was no free agency, and your ownership didn't spend $300 million, and jerseys probably didn't cost $300 for fans to buy. And there probably wasn't an NFL Network, 24/7 ESPN, and all that sort of attention that goes to each team. There just is not time for this the way that things work. Also, there's not time in this specific organization with the age and expense of the players. Mm-hmm. If you had drafted McCarthy at a time where you drafted 15 other young guys that you were going to all slowly develop together, and our plan is 4 years from now, well, that would be tremendous. That's a great team building approach. However, you don't have that, like, because you didn't put all the eggs in the drafting basket, mm-hmm. and you haven't hit home runs on the draft picks. Some are good, but not like the next 3 Justin Jeffersons. Then you're in a spot where, like, these guys are 27, 28, 29. They're in their primes. Like, you have to make this work right now. But I agree with you that there is not like even a Sam Darnold type quarterback that's expected to be available for next year. And also for every Sam Darnold that worked out, there's like 15 Mitch Trubisky's, Paxton Lynch's, like guys who just never really got it.
Let's talk about the rest of the football team, if you want to, for these last 3 games. So I the other day, Alec Lewis was in here, and I said to Alec, like, hey, what are we looking for, not McCarthy related, for the last couple of games? And, that noise he makes where he goes, ah! Like, that's kind of what he did. That's kind of what he did, because he really struggled to think of other players whose futures could be directed by these last couple of games. Do you have any nominations for that?
I am going to go with Jalen Redmond, who's already had a good season, and Ty Ingram Dawkins.
Oh, yeah, I like that one. He was good the other night.
Yeah, and he's been playing a little bit more. He's still hovering only between like 15 to 20% of snaps for the defense, but I think you're looking at maybe having decisions to make with Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, like considering the cap space and all of that and just their age and some of the struggles they've been up against this year. Obviously, Javon Hargrave dealing with another injury now after that game the other night. And so those are 2 that I'm like, if they really step up in these next 3 games, that maybe changes some decisions that you make in the offseason and allows you some wiggle room there at a position that was highly spent on last year. And you can say, okay, no, these are guys that we're going to roll with and that we feel comfortable with. Again, obviously, Jalen Redmond's done that. I feel like he's been a little bit quieter in recent weeks, but early in the season had some great games. I think he's at 5 sacks right now. But so yeah, it's him, I think, as the 1A, and then Ty Ingram Dawkins I'll sneak in there as like a young guy that we haven't talked about just in general a ton this season. But if they factor him in a little bit more in the next few weeks, could be an interesting case.
Every player that we talk about almost seems like in comparison to the quarterback, because the quarterback is just so monumental for any franchise. But you could nominate Dallas Turner for sure, because now Jonathan Grenard's going to be out. And, Brian Flores wasn't really buying what we were selling when we were asking him just a few minutes ago about Dallas Turner playing the Jonathan Grenard role, where he's been clearly better than trying to be Andrew Van Ginkel. Shocker, Van Ginkel's 30 years old and incredible, so it's kind of hard to emulate and unique. There's not too many of him, where Grenard is a rush the passer guy. I think we should have some expectations for Dallas Turner. If he can get to 7.5, 8 sacks or something on the season, which I know is not the best metric, but have a couple of good games strung together here to the point where you're saying, all right, that was a big step, and now take another one next year. And hey, make that hard on them. Make that complicated on them of where to fit you in with Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel, because you've played so well. Like that, I think that he does have a chance to do that.
Yeah, I didn't want to say Turner because you've made a point of pointing out how often we talk about Turner this season, but I agree. And I think one thing that's really interesting with him, and I'd be curious to talk to him this week about this, is like he had those 2 or 3 weeks back-to-back midseason that were like really bad. He had these big penalties, sacks taken off the board, all of that. And it feels like he's really turned a corner since then. And we haven't heard anything about, like, was there some conversation Brian Flores had with him or one of his fellow linebackers, like anything like that. But I'm just curious if that was like an internal self-revelation, like having those moments and being like, I can't keep doing this if I want to build the career I want, or if there was something else that prompted that. Because I remember like late last season, one of the conversations after I had got here with Brian Flores was about having the conversation about routine with Dallas Turner and guys late in the season, and how like your season's going on 4 more weeks than it is a college season and all of that. So I'm curious if there's been another conversation of something along those lines.
I think for me, it just correlates with, and that definitely could be, but it just correlates with him playing the role where he could just rush passer. I mean, it seems to be not that he can't do a lot of stuff, and we've seen him make some really spectacular plays in coverage, like shutting down screens. Even there was a check down by Dak Prescott where he was rushing and then turned around and chased the guy down all the way from behind to stop a 3rd down. So he's done some good things each game, but it feels like, yes, he's got those abilities, and if you've seen him catch the ball in practice, you're like, oh, I could see why they put him in coverage, or the interception last year against Seattle. But where he's going to get his production is probably just a bunch of rushing the quarterback and then put a move on somebody and get a sack like he did it against Seattle. But I feel like that one is still a little up in the air for what's your level of optimism on him. I think clear progress.
Yeah.
But is it like very optimistic or more along the lines of, yeah, it was good, but it was definitely not great? There's a couple other players to mention. Their new intrigue with Jay Ward, where he's on the field a lot more. And look, I think Harrison Smith is probably going to retire.
Yeah.
So what's your story for next year? I think Theo Jackson, it's been quite clear that he's more of a rotational type of role player guy. Everybody loves him, highly intelligent, but there are physical limitations, I think, that probably keep him from being like maybe the next, Harrison Smith or something. But that position is a little up in the air for how they're going to feel about it next year with, do you put Metellus back there? Do you have Jay Ward as a starter? Or are you going to just go forward with Theo Jackson and say, hey, this was his first time starting? Or do you go into free agency and look for some veteran player? And here's another thing. We're not even 100% sure Brian Flores is the defensive coordinator next year. If he is, we heard him today talk endlessly about Harrison Smith and how valuable he is basically calling the defense on the field. Well, that I think now has to become Josh Metellus, but it certainly wasn't the same, because like Harrison's one of the GOATs. It was not quite the same earlier in the year. So I wonder about how like that progresses if they do lose Harrison Smith.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly if Smith is indeed gone and Flores stays, I would think that he moves Metellus into that Smith role, at least to start, because the thing we heard him say today is like to put a guy in a role like the one Harry plays where he's able to check the coverages and change things around. Like he needs to have some experience with them personally, not just a reputational thing. So even if they were to bring someone in free agency who maybe Flores thought could do that, I still think it would be maybe near the end of the season or midway through the season that those responsibilities switch from Josh Metellus, who he's praised a lot for being able to do that type of stuff and having a high football IQ, to, okay, no, I want Josh Metellus more up front, more at that second level potentially, and giving that new person, whoever that may be, that responsibility.
I also think, throw one more at you, then we'll get to the fifth question. Kevin O'Connell, these last three games, I think are extremely important to him. Like I'm not talking about in a could get fired type of realm. I'm just talking about in a confidence in him and the relationship with JJ McCarthy and how those two are clicking, because the last couple weeks they have seemed to be very much on the same page. How someone performs is always going to dictate how good your relationship with them is in football. But those two, McCarthy and O'Connell, have really been through it this year. And to finish on a strong note, to go 9-8, to go 8-9, and create a run through the end of the season, I think would be really important for O'Connell to look back at this year and go, as much of a nightmare as so many things were, the injuries early on, the injury to JJ, the Carson Wentz thing, the whole circus with him in LA and everything else, if you come out 8-9, it's definitely not what we thought it was going to be, but it's better than nothing. And to win all of the games the rest of the way would be, I think, a really big accomplishment to get over 500, because oftentimes, won't happen this year, but oftentimes 9-8 gets you into the playoffs.
Right.
So how important, or maybe what is the thing you're looking for from O'Connell for these last three games?
I think it's continuing the course with what has been working for JJ, because I think it would be easy now that they've stacked those two wins, say they stack a third against the Giants, for him to go into those final two games, which do require a little bit more intense game planning, being the opponents they are and being divisional opponents. But I think if it's clear that what they've done the past two games is working for JJ.
Yes.
And so I think he just needs to stick with that and put aside anything of, itching to maybe do something more intricate or intense, and just let JJ settle in, stack the wins, stack the confidence, stack the positive plays, all the things that they say they want to stack. Mm-hmm. I think that will be the mark for O'Connell, is letting JJ close out strong without feeling the need to push anything conceptually. If it occurs naturally and we get through the Giants game and it feels like JJ's ready to handle more, certainly. But you get into the Lions game and he's like freaking out in the first quarter, then okay, go back to what's working. And I think that will be the big key, because I think that's one of the questions, or one of the things that popped up discussion-wise as we've gone through this whole season with JJ's development is Kevin O'Connell's done this with a lot of older quarterbacks, but he hasn't ever had to do it with someone fresh out of college like this in such an intense role. So staying the course, letting JJ build up confidence, I think that will be a good path for KOC.
And, we all make this sound very easy. Like, why didn't you just do it this way? Well, first of all, Washington and Dallas,
yes,
the two worst defenses against the pass in the NFL. I think they're both even worse than Cincinnati, worse than the Jets, or at least they were going into this week. I mean, this is truly, truly AAA level, like not NFL caliber defenses that you're used to facing. Not even the 20th defense is like 50 miles better than these teams. So running the training wheels version got them these wins, got the confidence back, got a little belief, got them rolling. But I do not think you can run this type of offense week in and week out and have the explosiveness level, have the consistency that you need to go through a whole season next year. Like, this was the right thing to do. Also, it's hard to figure out what your quarterback really is when he plays the first 2 games and then has to sit the next 5.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's just a really hard thing to do. I also think that McCarthy, in meeting rooms, in practice, we saw this during camp, I think he gets it. And then it's just about applying it, but he has to play in actual games to do it. So it's a much tougher balance than it is when you're sitting on your couch or in the press box eating popcorn. Speaking of which, 5th question for you is, Snoop Dogg is going to perform here at halftime on Christmas Day. And what I realized chatting with you before we started recording was that we view Snoop Dogg quite differently, because when I was a youth and he was starting to emerge, he was a legitimate gangster rapper who was once on trial for his freedom. And now he's like chilling with Martha Stewart. That's odd to me. I mean, good for Mr. Dogg. He's one of the all-time great rappers to me, like one of the most gifted rappers to ever come out. And but how I viewed him was like, this guy's like a scary gangster rapper who is involved in stuff that is unfathomable to me. And now he's just like a chill dude who cooks and coaches kids. And, I guess we all change.
Yeah, there's been some image rehabilitation, manipulation, just restart. I don't know, with him for sure. But yes, I mean, I am aware of all of that. I'm aware that Snoop Dogg was a rapper, a very prominent rapper. But certainly, like, I think for my generation, like, more of what he has been this kind of like personality that's invaded all these different spaces. And admittedly, I think like a very interesting way, like Martha Stewart, obviously, that's just kind of like a crazy one to be in, though she was also in jail for a time.
That's true.
I know.
She's gangster.
But like with the Olympics coverage that he's done, and the way NBC has used him in that, it's really fascinating. So it's an interesting choice. I'm curious, like, if they'll do any like non-music stuff in the halftime with him, like if any of it will be like performance. There's going to be special guests in there. Obviously, Netflix has a lot of celebrities it could call on. They've already been doing it with like David Harbour from Stranger Things, like doing advertisements for these games and stuff. So I'm curious how much will be him performing those songs that you grew up knowing versus them maybe trying to play into more of the side of him that I know now and have been more familiar with in the past 10 years.
I don't know if a lot of his songs would be appropriate for a Christmas Day performance. I would actually love to see Snoop Dogg do Christmas songs in his Snoop Dogg way. And just in case you hear this, Snoop, I'm a huge fan. I can't wait. I mean, Doggy Style was just one of the greatest albums of all time. There's no debating it, even if the name feels awkward coming out of me right now. So I think that he'll put it somewhere in between of like maybe a classic Snoop Dogg song that's a little bit tidied up, and then maybe some Christmas cheer to it. I hope he wears a Christmas hat. I mean, this is cool. We were wondering about this, like, who's it going to be after Detroit? Got freaking Jack White, and he crushed it. There's a high bar now for Snoop Dogg.
Well, and just last year, I mean, Netflix's debut halftime show was Beyonce, which is a pretty high bar to set.
Right.
And obviously, like, there was like millions of people that tuned into that game just for the halftime show. And then we're a week away and we just got the announcement. I was beginning to think there wasn't going to be a halftime show. I was like, well, they just gave up on that idea. Like they couldn't find anyone that would be recognizable to Minnesota in terms of like, this is a homegrown hero, which obviously they didn't because they went with Snoop Dogg, but with special guests. I don't know if there's any Minnesotan special guests that they could bring out that would make sense with Snoop.
I don't know if Lizzo is still popular or if that's not a thing anymore. Not really. Briefly, she mentioned the team in her big song.
Yeah.
So that goes to all of my pop music knowledge, and that is that for us. Emily Leiker, you do a great job at the Minnesota Star Tribune, and I know you guys have done some fun podcasts on Access Vikings where you go through and learn Vikings history.
Yes.
And what a zoo that must be to walk through and just look at all of the museum of insanity that is the Minnesota Vikings. But we are glad to have you on the beat, and we'll definitely do this again.
Thanks for having me.
All right, there's Emily Leiker. She did a great job on the show, dropping in, and we're going to get Manny Hill here in just a second. If you're wondering, you should be watching anyway, but if you don't have Prime, maybe, then the Seattle Seahawks up early, 7-0, a fourth down stop, and then a huge play from Kenneth Walker. Welcome in now to the show, Manny Hill, and I just wanted to answer one question for the comments about the size of Sam Darnold versus JJ McCarthy was a question in the comments. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be looking down at the game sometimes as we have this conversation, but Darnold is grown up. He's got man strength now from shoulder to shoulder. I don't know how many quarterbacks that are in the league that have as big of a chest as Sam Darnold. He was recruited as a linebacker, so he's a big dude. Like whatever the height and weight is not necessarily representative of the width, I guess, of Sam Darnold. And one of the reasons he throws such a beautiful football is the amount of strength and torque that he can create from his upper body being so strong, where JJ McCarthy drives much more from his legs, as we've seen, like that whole thing of the kind of drop and drive. And that's why his leg kicks up. That's where he gets a lot of his velocity. McCarthy is no skinny kid, not like when he was going through, recovery and stuff. He's a pretty big kid, but it's not the same as being, fully grown as Sam Darnold has. So Manny, here's my question for you. As we, pay attention to this and we can comment on what's going on with Rams Seahawks. Like, what a time to watch the National Football League and not be a part of these playoff races. What's a better conversation? This is what I want you to tell me. What is a better Minnesota Vikings conversation right now? Is it what JJ McCarthy can do in the last 3 games or what their quarterback options are for 2026? What is the better discussion?
I think right now, especially considering that McCarthy's played a lot better these last couple of games, I think it's more about what he does to finish these last 3 games of the season. I think that's the most important thing, because if you're Kevin O'Connell and you're Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, you want this to work out with JJ McCarthy. I mean, you don't want to have to go into the offseason next year and be thinking about, all right, we're going to have to bring in a guy that's maybe going to have to compete with JJ, maybe push him a little bit more. You just want, you invested a 10th overall pick in this 22-year-old kid. You want him to be the guy that you are building your franchise around for the next decade. And he leads you to a lot of winning. So I think if you're them, you're really dialed in, obviously, to these last 3 games. And I think for us as observers, it is what he does in these last 3 games, because I don't think we can really have a legitimate discussion about quarterback options for next year until we really see a lot more of McCarthy these last 3 games. And then that'll give us a better idea.
I feel the exact same way. Is that how can we have that conversation truly and come to any real conclusions about what we would do, this, that, or the other thing? Who should they go after this guy? What about this option? Until we know what the 11-game sample size actually looks like. Because right now, the 8-game sample size would suggest to you that, if you just scrambled these games up and said, all right, like, here's all the games, I'm not going to tell you what order they happened, you would go, no, absolutely not. call Kyler Murray, you need anybody to play quarterback, not this guy. But that's not real life. Real life works in the way that, he gets destroyed in Green Bay, comes back the last 2 weeks. There's clear differences in the offense in at least some ways. The personnel that they're using, building off of the run, and he's performed not just well, but confidently. It's if he came out and threw a bubble screen to, I don't know, Jalen Naylor, and he ran it 75 yards for a touchdown, and then his stat line looked really good, but it was like, well, there was a 75-yard bubble screen. It wasn't against Dallas. There was a little more of that against Washington, but even then there were some downfield completions, a couple along the sideline to Jordan Addison that were very impressive. And that's the type of stuff that Kevin O'Connell wants for his offense. And I remember earlier this year, we were having this like, oh, should they get quick game going and so forth? They don't want to get quick game going. They want to push the ball down the field, get explosive plays. And they drafted the kid because he's got a big arm. That's one of the reasons. And so seeing that big arm come to fruition with accurate enough passes down the field to create explosives, even if he does whiz one over here or there over somebody's head on an intermediate throw and it's not perfect, if you can hit 28-yard passes, 58-yard passes, 18-yard passes like he was the other night, well, that could be your quarterback, and it's going to be a little in flux up and down, but certainly you can win with that type of explosive offense. Seeing it look so much different the last 2 weeks is worth saying, well, let's see the last 3 before we decide where they should stand with him.
Yeah, I think the main thing is just let's see these. It's like you look at it as these last 2 games have been really good. You've seen a lot of improvement from previous games. And yeah, we can talk about the defenses that he was going up against. These last 2 games weren't very good, but you got to start somewhere. You've got to see some progress somewhere. And those type of games can build confidence, just by having success, just being able to complete some of those big plays that Kevin O'Connell wants to see you create in this offense. I think the biggest thing now is just you want to see him kind of, put together a string of games, not just, a couple of games in a row, put together a string of games where we start to see a little bit more consistency and growth and improvement. And then you can feel a lot better, about him going forward. Again, a huge opportunity against a defense in the New York Giants that's not very good this weekend. Pass rush is a little bit better for them than what you've seen the last 2 games, so that might present a little bit of a challenge. But I think that could be good. It could be good to see him, go up against a defense, a secondary that you can kind of pick apart a little bit. But it's kind of like you're playing a video game and you beat it on the easy level. So now you're going to try and beat it again on the normal level, or you start out at very easy, then you go up to easy, then you go up to normal, then you go up to hard. You just take those steps where each time you play it a little bit harder to kind of test yourself and challenge yourself. And this is how it's going to kind of play out for JJ McCarthy here these last 3 games, because you're going to go, these last 3 games, the way they're laid out, it's going to kind of progress that way where you're playing a bad defense again, but they're going to present maybe a little bit more of a challenge with their pass rush than what you've seen so far. Then you're going to take on Detroit, which is just a team that's just good. Maybe not a great defense, but it's a team that is good, that can put some points on the board. So that's going to be a challenge for you. And then you're going to be playing Green Bay. Now, again, as you've alluded to many times, what's Green Bay playing for or not playing for the last game of the season might kind of change things a little bit. But if the Packers are playing for something, they're going to put their best foot forward. They don't have Micah Parsons anymore, but that's still a pretty good defense that you're going to be going up against. That's going to present some challenges. So this is going to be a real good test, I think, at a good time towards the end of the season to see what JJ McCarthy is really made of.
The annoying thing about the Giants is that I don't care about him playing the Giants that much. It's more or less, can we just get to those last 2 games? Can we just sim the Giants game? Can they just play Brosmer, move along from that game, and then play the ones that really matter? Now, where it really matters is if you do have a bad game against the Giants, that team does not want to win. I've actually been really amazed by, if you look at, like, on FanDuel, the Vikings are 2.5-point favorites. I would have them as like 10.5-point favorites.
I was going to say, that's it?
They're so much better. They like across the board. From an actual roster perspective, they are wildly better than the Giants, who are missing Scatterboo, missing Malik Neighbors. Their defensive signings have not worked out. Their best defensive player, Dexter Lawrence, has a half a sack this year. Like, what is even happening in New York? And they just got lit up by Marcus Mariota last week. And you have a Vikings team that really wants to end with a winning record. I mean, they would love to run through the rest of these teams, walk out, and then have Kevin O'Connell be able to say, look, all the things we went through with the young quarterback and everything else, I finished with a winning record. Look how good of a coach I am. And I think he'd have, somewhat of a case there if that were to happen, if they were to beat Detroit and Green Bay. But this one is only a pothole you can step in. You get no credit for stepping over the pothole. And that's the other part of it. It's like if McCarthy goes for 260 and 2 touchdowns and they win, 24-7, like, okay, that's great. That team literally is tanking. Like they do not want to win. They want the number 1 overall draft pick. I'm sure that doesn't mean, Jackson Dart won't play hard. I'm sure he will, but their organization wants to be at the top of the draft. So like this doesn't really help us understand JJ McCarthy better unless he absolutely stinks. And then it helps us understand him better. It's a no-win situation for him. Those last 2 games really say a lot more because Detroit, regardless of their playoff situation, is going to come in and play hard. You know that. They're not going to bow down to the Vikings and just, roll over. And Green Bay, if they are in a position where they need to win that football game, is going to be frothing at the mouth to do the same thing that they did the last time to JJ McCarthy. And even if there's no Parsons, it's still a really good defensive mind who's running them. It's a lot of talent. It's guys who were drafted high. Like it isn't, it's not a joke outside of Micah Parsons, even if it's different. So those last 2 games should be a lot more telling than this one. And that's why the lead up to this is kind of like mostly still about the Cowboys and Washington games, because I'm just not that interested in this one. Just get through it. Nobody get hurt. Give us all a chance to see how JJ McCarthy looks in the last games of the season. Now I want to get to, so Seattle got a stop here, 7-3. You surprised by that? You surprised by the field goal there? I'm a little surprised by a field goal there.
A little bit, yeah. Love the uniform combination.
Oh, it's great.
Tonight.
Everything
Seahawks
about this
going
is
full on. Seahawks going full on Oregon Ducks tonight, which I kind of like.
Everything about this is great, and it makes me so angry. Like I just want, I want to be there. I want to be covering that game in the, in the Seattle rain or whatever. So. Anyway, that's kind of where I stand on this game, but there is a test though, Manny, and this was the FanDuel question of the day. And then I want to get to questions, comments, thoughts. I assume, a lot of you are probably watching along with the game like we are. But any questions and thoughts, I'm going to get to them in just a second after Manny answers this question. But FanDuel question of the day is Justin Jefferson's over under is 55.5 yards. Is this the week that it happens? I've never seen Jefferson this low on FanDuel or, anywhere, 55.5 yards. But I feel like I've been saying for weeks, hey, there's an opportunity there. Hey, this Washington team is bad. Hey, this Dallas team is bad. But at least the chances were there against Dallas. There's a touchdown negated. There's a touchdown drop. It felt like there's an overthrow by, just 6 inches or something. I'm calling it, Manny. I'm putting it down on paper. This is the week that Justin Jefferson goes for 3 bills. It's like shocking to say 100 yards for Justin Jefferson, almost double the over under, but I'm going there for this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, at some point it's got to click together between these two. I mean, it's been such a slog, and it's been nice to see McCarthy play better these last couple of weeks. But at some point, you've got to get your best overall player. You've got to get him the football. You've got to get the ball in his hands. And to your point, there's been opportunities there these last couple of weeks. It's just felt a little bit off, whether Jefferson drops a touchdown or, like you said, the touchdown in Dallas that was negated because Josh Oliver wasn't lined up properly. I mean, it's just little things like that kind of seems like it just sort of adds up. You talked about the overthrow. Those are little things that are just kind of on the margins that you just feel like if you just, there's just a little bit more attention to detail there, a little bit more crisp, understanding of what you're trying to do out there, then things are going to, start to pick up for you. And it almost kind of feels like you get Jefferson, those first 3 catches that he can get in this game, like that's going to get the ball rolling again, and then it's just going to take off. That's what I'm kind of feeling like. And so that's what I'm going to be looking for now with this game on Sunday is just, can you get Jefferson going early, and then, the takeoff is great. And then, like you said, he ends up with over 100 yards and 8-9 catches, and we're like, there it is. There's the Justin Jefferson we know, and now McCarthy's finally found his target the way he should.
And their desperation to get him to 1,000 yards should be 10 out of 10 at this point. And that's the canary in the coal mine for us. That will tell us, is this really working or not? Okay, so getting into the questions in the comment section, Kyler Murray and Tua are 2 veteran quarterbacks who have had some success in the past. Because Joe Burrow, we talked about this, there's a scenario, and man, did he not deny that there's a scenario this week at the podium, that's for sure. But okay, let's put that aside as the pipe dream of all pipe dreams. Tua and Kyler Murray, let's just say that these next 3 weeks do not work out for JJ McCarthy, and we're all going, oh, okay, I guess it just was Dallas and Washington. Are you interested in either one of those quarterbacks?
I would be more interested in Kyler, just because I think there's a little bit more ability there. I mean, Tua, this is probably as low as I've ever been on Tua at this point. I mean, it just, with the injuries and, the concussions have been kind of concerning too, where you just kind of wonder what his long-term future looks like on that front. And the decision-making with him too has been very questionable. And I also kind of wonder about the fit in Kevin O'Connell's offense too, where, Tua's kind of with Miami, especially under Mike McDaniel's, been kind of a short to intermediate passing guy. He's not really been a guy that's been good at just standing in the pocket, going through the progressions and firing the ball down the field. He's got the arm talent. He's got the arm strength to be able to do that, to make those throws, but he just hasn't really done that well over the last couple of years. So I don't really love either option, but if you're telling me it's down to those 2 guys, I would probably lean Kyler in this case.
Yeah, I would probably lean far toward Kyler. The injury history for Kyler, okay, this year he had an injury that I think clearly he could have come back from, and they were just like, nope, because if you get hurt, then we have to pay you your guarantees, and that's kind of what's going on with Tua right now. Why, when we're talking about why they're benching him, it's like, well, once you get eliminated from the playoffs, this happened a couple years ago with Russell Wilson. Like, we don't want you to get hurt and then have to pay you and keep you around. So we'll just put you on the shelf. Kyler Murray last year had a good season overall. Like, it was a pretty good season. Let me see where he ranked by PFF last year. Last year, he was their, let's adjust this a little bit, 11th best quarterback last season by PFF grade, which is, really good. If the Vikings had the 11th best quarterback play this year, they would be, at least in games like we're seeing from Seattle and the Rams, right? Like games that matter in the NFC race, if they had the 11th best quarterback. And that's something I don't think people realize is how well he played at times last year. He completed almost 70% of his passes, 7.1 yards per attempt. But in terms of his big time throws, he was 7th in the league in big time throws last year. The trouble with Kyler Murray is consistency when it's either huck it way down the field or not or nothing, right? Like, he is not a guy that can work the middle of the field consistently. He's got to kind of work the edges. He's kind of got to hit those deep shots, which, when you have these receivers, you could see that working, and the scrambling has to be on point as well. So I wouldn't be like wildly out on that if the next 3 games go terribly then you're saying, all right, is it Mac Jones? Is it Tua? Is it Aaron Rodgers? Is it Kirk? Is it Kyler? You're like, well, I mean, this is not that hard of a decision. When you look at last year, he had a game against Los Angeles where he threw 3 touchdowns and averaged 12 yards a pass. He had another one against the Jets where he was incredible. The end of the season last year, he threw for 321 at LA and then had another really good game with 4 touchdowns against San Francisco. I mean, he has the capability of putting up huge days. And then there's a lot of other games that I could read you from last year that are so mediocre and so frustrating that it's kind of like a Kirk level, but done totally differently, where you're saying, can you really compete for a Super Bowl with this? The answer is probably no. But if you have to make an emergency pull the ripcord on JJ McCarthy, which actually brings me to a question, is how bad would it have to be over the next 3 weeks? And just for the record, I don't think it will be. Like, I think that McCarthy will continue to make progress, probably have ups and downs against the Detroit Lions and Packers. You're going to pick the schedule later. I have them winning 2 out of the last 3 games probably. But that's how I think it will go. But if it doesn't, if this is 6 picks, 1 touchdown, 8 sacks, like just real, for whatever reason, the wheels come off and I don't know, maybe he got way too confident. He just starts throwing it into every tight window. I mean, how bad would it have to be in order to do something like this at this point?
I think we would end up having to see something that resembles the first game against the Green Bay Packers. Yeah. I think it'd have to be like really bad where it just looks like he's not seeing the field. He's holding on to the ball too long. He's making, not making good decisions, taking a lot of sacks. It would just have to be, and that was pretty much the lowest point of the season for him was after that Packers game. And I think we would have to see something like that sort of repeat itself, because then at that point you're thinking, man, I was like, we talk about roller coasters with young quarterbacks, but it's not supposed to be that bad again. Like at this point where he's got more experience now and played a few games since then, it's not supposed to be that bad. So I think if we see something like that happen against, I think it's almost impossible to see that kind of performance against the Giants. If that happens against the Giants on Sunday, then yeah, it's DEFCON 5 at that point, with him. But yeah, I think if you're going to get to a point where you're thinking about like making a move for a Kyler Murray or something like that in the offseason, I think we would have to see a repeat of that first Green Bay game against Detroit or against the Packers again on week 18.
Before military folks chime in, technically DEFCON 1 is the worst.
Or DEFCON 1, yes. Yes,
okay,
that's right.
Just, because there's 2 things that happen every single time is if you say DEFCON 5, the military people are like, hey, or the horse racing, if you call something the quarter pole and it's early in the season, the quarter pole is actually at the end of the race. So you have to, those are common sayings that sometimes go wrong. So just letting everybody know that I'm aware. But yeah, I think like if one of the games doesn't go his way, but there's things that you like, that's what was so disturbing about the Packers game, because every other game, even if it went badly, there's at least some stuff. The Atlanta game is a little harder to find, but at least there's some stuff in the Chicago game with the comeback. There's the Ravens game. He had a few nice passes, the one to Naylor in the back of the end zone. Like you could see it. And then he just got a little wild there toward the end of the game. Chicago, there's a lot of tough moments, but he has the drive to put them ahead and the, touchdown pass and that sort of thing. And you're like, okay, well, at least there's those moments, and they probably should have won the Chicago game if not for the whole kickoff debacle and everything else. But if there's more games, any more of these final 3, where you can't even talk about anything that went right, and it's just, oh my gosh, what happened there today? Especially, and this is where the owners do get involved a little bit, which is if it's at US Bank Stadium. Think about the magnitude of these games if Green Bay has something to play for. You are talking about Christmas Day. The nation is watching. Snoop Dogg is here. Netflix. Like, it's a big thing. And if you embarrass yourself on that stage, I mean, you could be talking about everybody in the organization feeling extremely embarrassed by how that went and then not having the type of trust. And then the same thing for the last game. We know that this ownership cares a lot about how they perform against the Green Bay Packers. And when people were talking at 4-8, like, oh, there's no way they fire this person or maybe this. And my thing was always, if they lose the rest of the games and they fall apart in that one, then you could be talking about it. So now I think the firing conversation has probably been put aside. But look, so much, as we can see, so much can change in 3 weeks. Like 3 weeks ago, we're like, okay, Kyler Murray, Mac Jones, whatever. And now we're like, oh, we'll hold off on that. And this is the hard part about the National Football League is I could really use 20 more games to figure this out. And I just do not have them. Mr. Mayor asks, what player that we've cut over the last few years are we most upset about playing elsewhere right now, not including Sam Darnold? I don't know if I have a great answer to this, Manny. And that's kind of speaks to how I have felt over the last couple of weeks, really, and through, I mean, a good portion of the second half of the season is the defense has looked like a defense you could win a lot of games with. And the offensive line, when it's healthy, has looked like a top 5 to 7 unit in the league, which was the expectation. We know how good the receivers are. Their belief in Jalen Naylor has certainly paid off. The running game is the best run game we've seen from Kevin O'Connell, which is a very low bar, but that's the facts. The kicking has been ungodly. I mean, the kicking is unbelievable. There's not a lot of complaints that you can have. Now, there's certainly individual signings, moves, investments that you could say, well, specifically, I think the Jonathan Allen one has really blown up in their face. Byron Murphy hasn't been as good as they would have expected, although I think he'll be fine. But I mean, the overall units, there's not a lot that I could point to and go, wow, man, they just totally botched the defense. They totally botched the running back moves. They totally botched the line or something. I have a tough time. I mean, are we talking about like Nashawn Wright? I mean, I don't know. I don't know that there's too many players out there. Hey, they could really use Vidarian Lowe as a swing tackle. Is that the answer?
I mean, well, and I think that speaks to the overall roster being a pretty good roster. I think that just the biggest hurdle, the biggest thing that has held them back this year has just been the quarterback play. I mean, we've talked a lot about McCarthy, but things kind of went the way they went with Carson Wentz, and the one time you threw Max Brosmer out there, that was a disaster. So really, it's just been the quarterback play that has really been kind of the main culprit to them being out of the playoffs and sitting here at 6-8. And we're talking about these last 3 games as if, oh, what do we need to see to look forward to next year type of thing, instead of can they finish the regular season with some momentum to go into the playoffs and compete. So yeah, I don't know. I can't think of another player outside of Sam Darnold that you can look at and say, yeah, maybe they should have held on to that guy because the guy they replaced him with isn't good, or whatever. So I don't know. I'm just trying to think now if there's anybody else, but not really. I mean, this is a pretty overall solid roster. I think there's some weaknesses and maybe some shortcomings in certain spots that you would hope that they can improve on next year. But overall, this is a roster that I think is good enough to certainly compete for the division and maybe make some noise in the playoffs if they get good quarterback play.
And there are going to be a lot of questions at the individual positions in the offseason. Who are you drafting? How are you rebuilding a secondary that may lose Harrison Smith? And do you feel comfortable with the cornerback situation? I kind of don't. I would much rather see Isaiah Rodgers be a third guy than a second guy. And their answer to that was not good. And letting go some of the younger players like Nashawn Wright and other guys that maybe they could have developed, Caleb Evans, Reddy Stewart. Like, these are not great players, but at least they'd be young, developing in your system. And maybe there's something there. I like that. We're going to see a little more Jay Ward, someone who has developed under Brian Flores and under Matt Daniels over the last couple of years. But that's probably the nitpick I would have, is just that they haven't put much emphasis on younger players. And it's, we look at the draft picks and go, well, this one didn't work out or that one. Mekhi Blackmon's the other one, which I'm not saying he's had a great year for Indianapolis, but I mean, Jeff Okudah gave them nothing and then was injured, which I hate for him because, he's worked really hard. But I mean, Mekhi Blackmon was a young guy you drafted and then you just totally bail on him. I mean, even if there's something wrong behind the scenes, or even if there's a physical issue you're concerned about, like it's a third year young player who you picked to be a major part of this thing. And you just said, nah, like that's probably, and he did have a bad camp, but again, like, I don't know, man, they have no patience whatsoever with any young players, to stick with him. And that's probably the critique that I would have overall. Not that I think, again, that Mekhi Blackmon is like an all-pro.
Well, and he was coming off an injury last year where he pretty much missed the entire year. And, sometimes when guys are coming off an injury like that is where maybe kind of seen with Christian Darrisaw this year, where you're coming off kind of a major lower body injury. You kind of need that next season, even if you're playing throughout most of that year, you kind of need that next season to get yourself back, to ramp yourself back up to being what you were before the injury. And, maybe Mekhi Blackmon is a guy that next year in 2026, that's the year where he kind of makes the jump because he's now a full year removed from that injury, a full season removed from that injury. And now he can kind of get back to being himself. And, that's a guy that could be kind of helpful to you next year if you had him, but now you don't because, I get it. He didn't seem like himself. He didn't seem like the old version of himself. And you kind of were tempted to pull the plug on him. But in that specific position, it was kind of an eyebrow raiser, like that's not exactly where you have a lot of depth there. And you want to pull the plug on this kid that, maybe just give him a season to get back to his old self and see what happens. And then if he's repeating that in 2026, then you pull the plug and say, all right, this is just not going to work out here and move on. But that's one to kind of look at, I think, for next year, wherever he's playing. I don't know if he'll still be with Indianapolis or not, but that'll be interesting to see how things play out for him.
I mean, look, Fabian Moreau is a decent veteran corner, but like, what did that get you, in terms of progress at that position? That's just a guy who's a Band-Aid over that spot. He's somebody who can play if you have to. And if they were in the playoff race, maybe we wouldn't be talking about it or thinking about it too much. But even then, I probably would have wondered, like, why did you just, we talked about Zemiah Vaughn, who they seem to like, but then he ends up on the practice squad. Dwight McGlothern, who they seem to like, he ends up on the practice squad. It's like, okay, can anyone play corner who is under the age of 25 for Brian Flores? That I think maybe the one blind spot for him, or maybe just for the entire organization. When you get into this mode of, we need to win the Super Bowl, then you're going out and putting Fabian Moreau ahead of someone like Blackmon, someone like Stewart, someone like Nahshon Wright. Like, these are guys who, if you have any eye on the future, that you don't get rid of. So that's probably the one criticism I would have, that doesn't look great for them right now. And I'm again not saying like Brian Asamoah was the future either, but that's another guy who they basically never gave a chance to and then just bailed on. Like, oh, okay, all right. When it happens with enough players, you go, okay, there's maybe more to this story than just like, oh, well, that they all stunk, and so you need to get rid of all of them. And then it's Eric Wilson at 31 years old who's coming in here and doing it. I think it's a requirement maybe of the complexity of this defense. Let's see, K Skull, I think, says, if we trade away picks, how do we build around Joe Burrow? Well, here's the thing about the Joe Burrow scenario. 2026, you're trying to win the Super Bowl with Joe Burrow. It is very much a Matthew Stafford Rams situation where you are chips to the middle of the table. Addison is still cheap. Jefferson is in his prime. You're going for it. Darrisaw, you hope, is healthy. This offensive line looks really good in front of a Joe Burrow. A lot of the defensive players are in their primes. Van Ginkel is still great. Cashman, Grenard, all these guys. and then you draft the top player or something. Maybe you'd have to give away probably that top draft pick for him. But you're in a situation where you're just going for it, and whatever happens into the future happens. But if Burrow comes and plays for you and gives you a chance to win the Super Bowl, number one, that's worth it versus other options. If you don't believe that McCarthy can give you a chance to win the Super Bowl in the next 2 years, you might as well take the big old swing with a top 5 quarterback. But then if he likes it, if he signs an extension, even as the Bengals have been a JOKE over the last couple of years, he's over 500. You are just like Matthew Stafford, where it was like, what are the Rams? And I was part of this. So what are the Rams going to do if they don't make it? It's like, well, if you have a good organization, you'll be back.
Yeah. I mean, and the Rams are the epitome of that.
Yep.
I mean, they said, F them picks, sent them off to Detroit, got Matthew Stafford. They won the Super Bowl, and then they had a little bit of a dip, and Stafford got hurt. And even then, there were some questions of is Stafford going to play again, because his injury was pretty significant. But he's come back, and and they have a great coach too, obviously, with Sean McVay. So I think that's a big part of it. Their resurgence. But this is a league that if you make enough right moves, even if you're not batting 1,000 on every single free agency signing, every single trade, every single draft pick that you make, if you make enough good moves, if you have good quarterback play, you can get yourself back and recover and get yourself back into contention pretty quickly if you have the good quarterback play. So I think if you're the Vikings and you were to make this move for Joe Burrow, if it happens, and again, it's still kind of a pipe dream, even if, you get yourself in a Super Bowl contention for the next 2 years, and even if you have a little bit of a dip because of cap situations or certain guys getting older and moving on, you got Joe Burrow and you still got number 18, that's going to give you a chance, and it's going to give you the ability to kind of recover and bounce back. And Joe Burrow's 29 years old, so he's right in the middle of his prime right now. He still has at least a handful of really good, top-notch, elite-level quarterback play in terms of years left in him. So I think that window, if you have him, you're going to have a shot. And even if you have a little bit of a dip, he's going to be able to elevate you and get you back into shape if you just make enough decent moves.
And it becomes absolutely vital in that scenario to keep Brian Flores, because he raises the floor of your defense just by proxy of having him. And if you have a quarterback that could get you ahead in games, even if your defense is kind of mid in terms of talent, but you have Grenard and you have Van Ginkel and a couple other players, like as we've seen this year, you can paper, and in 2023, like you could paper over some stuff on the defensive side, which they would have to do over multiple years with Joe Burrow. There's no question about it. Like, it does present some problems down the road, but that one shot to me is worth its weight in gold. And yeah, what if he gets hurt? I know. What if anybody gets hurt? Like, you sign Jefferson to a contract, and I know he's got an injury history. That's part of it. He's also had some of the worst offensive line play in the entire NFL. But to me, like last year, he played the whole year. So I don't know. I always say if there's the chance to really, truly go for it, and you don't feel like you're anywhere close to that, then go for it. But a lot of it depends on just how they feel about JJ McCarthy. And Jay asked about what about like getting Kyler but keeping JJ? My thought there is I'm not so sure that you can really do that in the NFL the way things work. Theoretically, that sounds great. Like, oh, get Kyler for a year, develop McCarthy behind the scenes for a year, and then bring him back. I don't know if you could convince him of that. I just don't think that would really fly. And it doesn't feel like making any progress now. Like, the year to sit him was this year and play a veteran quarterback, maybe like, Sam Darnold, I don't know. And that would have been the time to do it. The time to do it is not after he's already played a full season and then say, all right, well, you made this amount of progress, but now actually have a seat, kid, for an entire season. I just don't think that actually works very well. I think if you're trading for Kyler Murray, it's under one scenario, which is really which is really the discussion. Like, what's the scenario for each one of these things? The one scenario is that when you look at if they get to the end of these last 3 games and they look at the totality of his 2 seasons as a Minnesota Viking, one that was lost to injury, but he was here, and then 2, what happened in 2025. And they just say, if they're sitting in a meeting and it's O'Connell and it's McCown and it's Kwesi and it's the Wilfs, and they say, like, all right, everybody vote if you believe in JJ McCarthy, and no hands raised, you got to trade for someone like Kyler Murray. I could absolutely see that being the best possible option, because Mr. Mayor was mentioning in the comments about Mac Jones, like being sort of tired of hearing Mac Jones's name. I mean, he does make sense, but he's not as good as Kyler Murray. Even this version of Kyler is better than, or gives you a better chance of it clicking and then going kind of crazy and having it actually work. Because at least the 1 year that it really worked for Murray was when he had DeAndre Hopkins still in his prime, and he played extremely well. John says, other than the Rams, what current NFL team is wide receiver first? I see way more balanced offensive strategy. Even the Rams are balanced. I mean, what is like wide receiver first mean? Like, teams that win often have really, really good wide receivers. But yeah, like, being good at everything is the best way to win. What's the model to win the Super Bowl? Great defense, great pass rush, great coverage, great offensive line, great running game, and great passing game. And a kicker who makes the clutch. Everything.
In other words, being a complete team.
Yes.
That's what used to drive me crazy when people say, well, defense wins championships. It's like, no, complete teams are the ones that win championships. The teams that are good in at least 2 of the 3 phases, mainly offense and defense. If you're a little shaky on special teams, then maybe you can kind of get through it. But it's helpful to be good in all 3 phases and be a complete roster. That's how that gives you the best chance to be successful.
I mean, as far as like who's paying their receivers, how they're performing. I mean, last year, the team that won the Super Bowl, if we want to do it that way, has 2 of the best wide receivers in the NFL that took a quarterback who I think we would both agree, Manny, is very, very good at his best, but is certainly not perfect, and is kind of like has to be doing one thing, and that's throwing down the field to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And if that works, with those guys going and making plays, you can win the Super Bowl. And he did not have a running game in the actual Super Bowl and got great performances out of his wide receivers and played like an MVP and all those things. So they're wide receiver driven, even if they're run first, but they've got top wide receivers. It's just, I don't know how to exactly answer that. I mean, Puka Nacua is, well, maybe not the brightest bulb in the box, as we found out this week. Puka Nacua isn't just sort of wide receiver driven. The guy has 1,400 yards this year, and the guy he's playing against, Jackson Smith-Njigba, has 15. They are number 1 and 2, and these guys are playing for the NFC. So I tend to think that, having, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison driving the success is the way to do it. But of course, we want to see a balanced attack.
Yeah, I mean, well, look at the Rams the last time they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
That was Cooper Kupp at the peak of his powers, and he showed it. He was the MVP of that Super Bowl. It was not Matthew Stafford that was the MVP of that game, folks. Just a little friendly reminder. It was Cooper Kupp, and he was arguably the best receiver on the planet during that time. Now, obviously, he's gotten a little older now, and he's declined. He's not nearly the player he once was 5 years ago. But yeah, I mean, we've seen this. The only time I can really think of in terms of teams like winning a Super Bowl that didn't have elite wide receivers was the New England Patriots, but they had Tom Brady. they had Tom Brady.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's just it's a little bit different, and you have to go back a little ways for that. The Rams just scored a touchdown, so they have taken the lead now on the Seattle Seahawks. This game is so far turning out to be the type of battle that we were thinking about. So we will go a few more minutes and then we'll jump off and go watch some football. I want to go through I want to go through just a couple of games for this week, Manny, because this is a thing I want to make for Thursday nights into our near future, is just our favorite games of the week to talk about. Just for a few minutes, kick them around and then get to picking the schedule. But the picking the schedule bit at the beginning of the season, it takes up a whole episode. But now it's like 5 minutes at the end. The Packers are at the Bears. The Bears are pretty banged up with their wide receivers. The Packers are playing their first game without Micah Parsons. On FanDuel, the Bears are 1.5-point favorites. Imagine that. Imagine after week 1 that I told you the Bears would be 1.5-point favorites going into this game at the end of the season over the Packers. I probably would not have really believed it after that. What do you make of this game?
It's intriguing. And, and I'm starting to be a little bit more of a believer in the Bears. I still don't think they're a great team, but they're well coached. I think Ben Johnson's done a really nice job. Their defense is not great, but they're finding ways to win games and, force some turnovers on the defensive side. And Caleb Williams is playing a lot better. So they're a team that's really intriguing. And the Packers, can they kind of bounce back from the tough loss in Denver and losing, sort of the gut punch of losing Micah Parsons, who was brought in as a guy that was really going to complete that defense and make them a legit championship contender. And now they don't have him. Still a good defense that you can win with. But how do they kind of handle that gut punch of not having the sort of the alpha dog of that defense anymore for the rest of the season? So that's going to be fascinating to watch, and I'm kind of leaning Bears in this one just because they're at home.
I do think that it has been a little bit on the underappreciated side that the Bears defense has improved quite a bit over the last, handful of weeks. I mean, of course, last week they're playing a top 10 Pro Bowl vote getter in Shedeur Sanders, which I saw this week, which is just
franchise quarterback.
Come on. That's kind of reminds me of the WNBA when they voted all of Caitlin Clark's teammates because her fans had never heard of the other players. So they just voted for like random backups on the Indiana Fever. But their performance against the Packers 2 weeks ago, like great scheduling, Raj. 2 weeks ago was pretty good. They held the Philadelphia Eagles to 15 points 3 weeks ago. Like this team has been starting to come together defensively. Even, if you go back a little bit to the Vikings game, they played well in that game. It wasn't just JJ McCarthy not performing. It was also Chicago deserved credit also. So them getting some defensive backs back, their coverage has been much better. Their run defense has improved, was very good last week. So that's something to watch there. Christian Watson's health is absolutely something to watch. And just when you're missing Devontae Wyatt and Micah Parsons, like what do they do? Like how do they, because Parsons is not just they're missing one edge rusher. No. This is like where is this guy? Like he's a scare factor for offenses who have to game plan completely differently when he's not in there. So I like that pick, Manny. And if there's a bunch of scenarios where the Vikings just look super bad, which is like if Chicago's rebuild is way better than theirs, if Seattle makes the Super Bowl, like there's quite a few of those situations. Tampa Bay and the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers are 3-point underdogs to Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield has been really poor in the last 4 to 6 weeks, just not the same guy. But I actually think that's who Baker is. Very hot, very cold. The Panthers fumbled the bag last week against the New Orleans Saints. Do we think this is really are the Panthers there yet for real or not? Because if they're actually there yet, like, hey, you're a competing team. They're back. Panther, who knows when the last time they were actually competitive was. Like, you're back. I think you win this week. And if it's, Panthers are probably going to need another year, then you lose this week.
Yeah, I think the Panthers have a chance to sort of expedite this plan of, getting back into contention and they have a chance to kind of do this, this year and being kind of a year ahead of schedule maybe. Because I'm certainly surprised by the fact that they're, I kind of thought that they were going to be, a 5 or 6 win team at best going into this year. But the fact that they've kind of gotten themselves and, last week aside, kind of kicking that one away against the Saints, is kind of working against them. But, the fact that they've gotten to this point and they picked up some wins against some quality opponents. They beat the Packers, they beat the Rams. Like they've got some wins over teams that are really, really good and, Super Bowl contenders. So I think they're pretty well coached. It feels like, it seems like Bryce Young is starting to kind of turn it around a little bit and put things together. Still not 100% sold on him, but it's looking upward now for him. And this is a great opportunity because the Buccaneers just are not playing well right now. You mentioned Baker not playing well. They've dealt with some injuries. Mike Evans is just doesn't look like the same receiver anymore. There's some questions on defense and can they get enough stops on defense? And they've kind of struggled with that too. So, and the Panthers have them at home. So you're going to have the home crowd behind you. I think, given what this game means for both teams, I got to think the Panther fans in Charlotte are going to be pretty amped up and pretty pumped up for this one because they know what it means. This is a chance for them to grab a hold of the division lead again. So I think that's going to work in the Panthers' favor. I like Carolina in this game.
Thank you so much to Jim for the super chat. And Jim doesn't offer a question or a comment, just football. I mean, that's when you really like you're legit. You're like the gold star member here of watching the show is when you just toss in a great super chat, which I really appreciate. Just say football. Thank you so much, Jim, for that. Yeah, I'm very interested in that game because I feel like they're really even, but Tampa Bay does have the more experienced quarterback. He's on the road. Yeah, we'll see on that one. The one other one I want to talk about, and this is one where it's actually funny. A friend of mine, Steve Palazzolo, works for 33rd Team now, the Check the Mic podcast, formerly PFF. He tweeted out the last time the Broncos played the Jaguars, and it was like 97 or whatever it was when they beat them in the playoffs. And it's like, obviously they've played since then. And it got community noted on social media. Like they've played 13 times. It's like, no. You're not getting it. Like community notes has no LOLs to it. The Jaguars and Broncos, this is a hell of a football game. Two of the best defenses in the NFL, two quarterbacks that everybody questions for reasons that those quarterbacks have certainly proved along the way. The Broncos are 3-point favorites. You have a young coach in Liam Cohen. You have an old coach in Sean Payton. Defensive talent out the wazoo. Benito, you've got Hines Allen, like great players on both sides. This is my favorite game of the weekend. And Denver, I don't know what the weather's going to be like in Denver, but you could get that little bit of snowfall or a little bit of crispiness on the field. Like, oh man, do we have to watch Giants Vikings? Like, I'm sure, because that one, I can't wait to see.
Yeah, this I feel like with the two defenses in this game, this kind of I don't want to get too far ahead of myself in terms of like magnitude of the matchup, but I'm getting kind of those vibes of like if it's low scoring, it'll still be really intriguing because of how good both of these defenses are. So I'm getting kind of, again, just bear with me here. I'm getting kind of 2011 Alabama LSU vibes, the 9-6 overtime game where it's just like, it's like it's such a low scoring game. We saw no touchdowns in that game, but it was just so compelling because of what was on the line in that game. It was, 1 versus 2 and two really great teams. I'm getting kind of the same kind of vibes. Now, it's not number 1, number 2 game of the century type of thing, but I get the sense that this is going to be a really low scoring game, and it's just going to be so compelling to watch because it's going to be like, it's 12-10 in the fourth quarter. Which one of these sort of polarizing quarterbacks can make the one throw, the one completion that ends up being the difference in this game? Which kicker can make a kick at the end of the game? Which defense can make that one last play to seal a victory? I'm excited for this. This is going to be a lot of fun. I don't know if this is going to be a CBS Nance and Romo game or what. I'm not sure. It's all AFC.
Yeah, I don't have strong opinions on broadcasters, but I have a struggle with listening to Tony Romo these days. So hopefully America gets something else. Greg Olson. let's wrap with picking the schedule here. I was gonna say, as you're talking about like predicting this is going to be like a knockdown drag out game. Remember a couple of years ago when there was that, I don't know, 51-48 game or whatever the score was between Kansas City and the Rams. And they're like, people were debating, would you rather see like a shootout or like a game in the mud that goes 6-3 that's just brilliant defensively? And my answer was just yes. Yes, I would like to see that football. If you told me it's a great game, now not 3-0 Vikings and Las Vegas Raiders with Aiden O'Connell and Josh Dobbs, but I'm talking about like two great teams like this, just throwing fists at each other. Like, let's go. Or if it's a shootout between great quarterbacks, also let's go. I'm happy with all kinds of different football outcomes. Let's have Manny pick the schedule here to put a wrap on the show. It's almost halftime in this game, so then we can jump off, watch the second half. The Vikings at the Giants. Manny, will you pick them to win?
Yes, I will. I think the Giants are awful to the point you made earlier. It doesn't even look like they're really trying to win. It seems like they're fully tanking. The Vikings are the better team by far, and they should take care of business.
I totally agree. I know I vowed not to pick them for another game this year when they got to 4-8, but unfortunately I have to break that. Or maybe fortunately, because they've played much better. I have to break that. I'm picking the Vikings to win, and I'm picking them to win by an ass kicking. I think it's going to be, I'm going to go like 24-7. I think that's what I'm going to go with. 24-7 Vikings. I just think they stink. I mean, they have the worst record in the league. It's not a hot take, but it's like looking at their games, it's nauseating. So then the games that matter, Vikings at home on Christmas Day, in front of the nation on Netflix, in front of Snoop Dogg. Do the Vikings win that game?
I'm going to say no. I've been pretty consistent the last few weeks of picking Detroit to win this game. I'm going to say no, but I actually think it's going to be pretty close. I think the Vikings will play well. I think the game will be competitive, but I think the Lions will make one or two extra plays and end up being the difference.
I think so too. It's, without Grenard, without Metellus, St. Brown, Gibbs, Williams, that's gonna be really tough. I just don't think that they'll be able to stop them like they did last time. And I do think McCarthy can have a good day. Like, their defense is pretty down bad recently, so he can have a good day. And look, if the final score at Detroit and Minnesota is 31-24 and the Lions win, you can walk out of that game still feeling pretty darn good. All right, now, so the Packers, so that would leave them at a, what are we at? 7-8, right? Season, or 7-9 at that point, if they were to lose to the Lions. So they're 7-9. Do they win the final game of the season?
I'm going to say no, because I'm going to predict that the Packers are still going to be playing for something. Because I just 10 minutes ago, I just picked the Bears to beat the Packers. So I think the NFC North is still going to be up for grabs there in Week 18 somehow, and the Packers are going to need to win it to win the division. And I think they're going to put their best foot forward. Obviously, without Micah Parsons, that's a big loss for them. But I think they're the better team. They're going to put their best foot forward because the game's going to mean something for them. And I got Green Bay winning the game.
Cooper Kupp, man. What are we doing? What are we doing, Cooper Kupp? It's supposed to be your revenge game. Cooper Kupp fumbled and botched an opportunity for Seattle to score at the end of the half. Game changer. Sam Darnold's fault somehow, probably. If they are to finish, last thing, if they are to finish 7-10, what do we do with that?
I think it's going to depend on how McCarthy looks. I mean, because I can live with them losing games if McCarthy's playing well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Obviously, you mentioned Grenard and Metellus being out, so that's going to make things a little bit harder for the defense. So if they're giving up a little bit more on the defensive side because they're missing those two guys, I can live with that. But if McCarthy's playing really well, and I mean like legitimately playing well, I'm not talking about 140 yards and a touchdown and a pick and hey, McCarthy played well. No,
right.
No, it's got to be we're past that now. We've got to see legitimate, well over 200 yards, him performing well, multiple touchdown passes, that kind of performance. If we see that and they still end up losing to Detroit and Green Bay to end the year, then I can live with that. But McCarthy being successful is so vital to this team's future. They need him to be good. They need this to work out, and we need to see signs that this is really progressing in the right direction.
7 and 10 for me would be eating vanilla ice cream with it being 62 degrees outside while listening to smooth jazz. Just boring, can't make anything of it, like uninteresting, no flavor to it at all. Just what am I supposed to do with this? I mean, yeah, there's this scenario you're talking about where McCarthy plays really well and they lose 2 games because most of their, or several of their big defensive players are hurt now. Like, okay, that's all right. That's a scenario. But if it's just like what you said, where, okay, he plays well against the Giants, mediocre against the Lions, mediocre against the Packers, you don't win either one of those games. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Am I supposed to, like, I want to come out of these 3 games either saying, okay, folks, they got to get somebody else, or come out of these 3 games saying, all right, they're good. And the middle one is just so frustrating.
Yeah, well, and let me be clear too. I'm talking about even if they lose those games, he plays really well. So again, if it's kind of mid and they're losing games, that's not enough for me. That's not enough for me to feel really good about it. It's, if they lose to Detroit 38-31 and McCarthy threw for 300 yards and a few touchdowns, then I'm still feeling pretty good because it's like at least he's playing well enough to where you have some optimism with him going forward, and you just need to kind of reset, recalibrate for next year. But if it's mid, like I need better than mid.
Yep.
Win, lose, or tie these last 3 games, I need to see better than mid at this point with him.
Manny Hill, thank you so much for your time, my friend. And we will have the roundtable cooking on Monday nights where we react to whatever it is that we see from JJ McCarthy. You never know what's going to happen next. But I do think that these last 3 games are a real opportunity for him to turn the corner. So thank you for your time, and I will see you Monday. Everybody else, here's the deal. So tomorrow night, it'll be myself and Andrew Kramer with the Hardcore Breakdown. I also recorded a podcast today with Bobby Peters, who wrote the book on the Vikings offense, X's and O's, last year, wrote an actual book about their offense from last year. So he gave a lot of great insight. We're going to run that interview tomorrow night. So thanks, Manny, and we'll see y'all later. Enjoy the rest of the game. Football.